How do we find a path to wholeness when so many different demands are dividing our attention? We are, most of us, living fragmented and distracted lives in the midst of a broken world. Yet, we yearn for wholeness. We want to be healthy, genuine people. We want to be undamaged, complete human beings. We want to be whole. And yet, experiences of wholeness seem elusive amidst the flurry of the demands surrounding us. Work, taking care of family, taking care of the household, figuring out how to make ends meet, volunteering, parenting, keeping up with the news, staying connected with friends, getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, responding to every bell and whistle of social media, ignoring the prompting of the still small voice within that wants us to listen to who we really are. Wholeness stacked up against all that doesn't have a chance, does it? Or does it? Catholic monk Thomas Merton claimed there is in all things a hidden wholeness. Teacher Parker Palmer has devoted his life to discovering the wholeness in himself and helping others to discover their wholeness in community. His book, A Hidden Wholeness, The Journey Toward an Undivided Life, published in 2004, is a good guide to this lifelong process, should we want to embark upon the path. He wrote, "The divided life comes in many and varied forms. It is the life we lead when we refuse to invest ourselves in our work, or we make our living at jobs that violate our basic values, even when survival does not absolutely demand it. The divided life comes when we remain in settings or relationships that steadily kill off our spirits, when we harbor secrets to achieve personal gain at the expense of others, when we hide our beliefs from those who disagree with us to avoid conflict, challenge, or change, when we conceal our true identities for fear of being criticized, shunned, or attacked, when we project our inner darkness on others, making enemies of them and making the world a more dangerous place." Palmer confessed, "I pay a steep price when I live a divided life, feeling fraudulent, anxious about being found out, and depressed by the fact that I am denying my own selfhood. The people around me pay a price as well, for now they walk on ground made unstable by my dividedness. How can I affirm another's identity when I deny my own? How can I trust another's integrity when I defy my own? A fault line runs down the middle of my life, divorcing my words and actions from the truth I hold within." I wonder, given the fairly widespread reality of living a divided life, we're kind of set up to do that by the wider culture, or at best the kind of distracted lives we lead amidst that culture of competing demands and fragmentation. How do we find a path to wholeness? Let's begin with the assumption that we have all experienced some moments of feeling whole, however fleeting they might have been. To help us recall such moments, consider this question for self-reflection. When were you first invited into a circle that helped you feel whole? This is the first of several reflective questions in the Soul Matters materials for this month's theme of wholeness, which is what we use in our congregation's theme circles. It's notable that the question is phrased in terms of a circle. The question is not, when did you first experience wholeness? The question is, when were you first invited into a circle that helped you feel whole? I can think of many places and activities in which I experienced wholeness as an individual, beginning in childhood, climbing trees and resting in their branches, ice skating at the rink across the street, the solitude of practicing piano or playing flute. But the word circle indicates something beyond an individual. And the question also includes the word invited, calling forth relationship. When were you first invited into a circle that helped you feel whole? Well, maybe the invitation wasn't obvious. Maybe you just showed up, and the circle of community over time invited you into deeper and deeper levels of knowing yourself and others and the spirit of life running through everything. I think that's how it happened for me. During childhood, I experienced circles of community that helped me feel whole in children's chapel, at church, and summer camp on the island. There wasn't a distinct invitation to these circles to me as a child. It's just where my family went. When I grew older, I also experienced wholeness within the circles of high school theater people and community theater in that small town where I grew up. Those were the only places where I really fit in during adolescence. I learned that it was okay to be myself in those circles of community, where we each had a role in a shared creative endeavor, and where outlandish expressions of creativity were accepted as the norm. A bit later on, the circle of Scottish Highland dancers and bagpipers at college invited me into another circle, a circle of rewarding discipline, joyful celebration, and an exploration of my roots, which deepened my sense of my own heritage and brought more wholeness. Later on, I was invited to volunteer at a food co-op where my housemates and I were members. My path to wholeness widened into understanding issues of food justice, the influence of multinational agribusiness on the economy and the land, and how our personal food choices affect a much wider circle of community. Soon after that, I was invited to apprentice on an organic farm, and my experience of wholeness went both deeper inside my soul and more effectively out through my hands. What would have happened to me if I had not been invited into these circles? I would not have experienced moments of wholeness in a relationship, nor found a path to more. I would not have discovered my true self and been offered a way to practice integrity between the truth within me and the reality outside me. The Gospel of Thomas states, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." I am convinced that people need intentional circles of community in order to bring forth what is within us and grapple with what we discover when we do that, both the beauty and the challenge. Parker Palmer wrote, "My life is not only about my strengths and virtues, it is also about my liabilities and my limits, my trespasses and my shadow." An inevitable, though often ignored, dimension about the quest for wholeness is that we must embrace what we dislike or find shameful about ourselves, as well as what we are confident and proud of. Palmer describes how the process of congruence between inner and outer life happened for a participant in a Circle of Trust retreat that he facilitated for about 20 elected and appointed officials from Washington, D.C. Yes, even there, people are yearning for wholeness. Palmer wrote, all of these folks had gone into government animated by an ethic of public service. All were experiencing painful conflicts between their values and politics, and all sought support for the journey toward living divided no more. One participant had worked for a decade in the U.S. Department of Agriculture after farming for 25 years in northeastern Iowa. On his desk at that moment was a proposal related to the preservation of Midwestern topsoil, which is being depleted at a rapid rate by agribusiness practices that value short-term profits over the well-being of the earth. His farmer's heart, he kept saying, knew how the proposal should be handled, but his political instincts warned him that following his heart would result in serious trouble, not least with his immediate supervisor. On the last morning of our gathering, the man from agriculture, looking bleary-eyed, told us it had become clear to him during a sleepless night that he needed to return to his office and follow his farmer's heart. After a thoughtful silence in the circle, someone asked him, "How will you deal with your boss, given his opposition to what you intend to do?" "It won't be easy," replied this farmer-turned-bureaucrat. "But during this retreat, I've remembered something important. I don't report to my boss. I report to the land." Palmer says we can look at this example as someone who is resolving to live an undivided life by finding his center in his values. So if we think of the man from agriculture like that, someone finding his values in the center of himself, we might visualize a circle. Ignore the paperclip. A circle that is whole. And we often have a yearning to be standing right in the center of ourselves and acting from that place, from our values. There's a clear boundary you can see in a circle between the inner truth and the outer reality. That's one way to conceptualize this man's story. Another way might be to think of his integrity as a path between his inner truth and the outer reality, like the Mobius strip. I couldn't trust myself to make this in front of you. You've seen these before though, right? If you trace your finger on what seems to be the outside of the Mobius strip, going along like that, outside, 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 at some point, all of a sudden, you find your finger is on the inside of the strip, and then it happens again, you come to the outside. The two sides really cannot be distinguished, and they're continually co-creating one another. Palmer claims that the message of the Mobius strip is clear. Whatever is inside of us continually flows outward to help form or deform the world, and whatever is outside of us continues to flow inward to help form or deform our lives. We yearn to be centered like the circle, but more than that, I think we want congruence between our inner truth and outer reality. And we get there by traveling an intentional path to wholeness, like tracing the finger along the Mobius strip. It should be easy, right? But Palmer continues, "Because this story is true, I cannot give it a fairy tale ending. I do not know if the man from agriculture returned to work and did exactly what he said he would do. His resolve may well have weakened by the time he got back home. And even if he held firm, the topsoil of Midwestern farmlands has yet to be saved. The policy process is too complex to be redirected by one person's moment of truth. But he said, every time we get in touch with the truth source we carry within, there is net moral gain for all concerned. Even if we fail to follow its guidance fully, we are nudged a bit further in that direction. And the next time we're conflicted between inner truth and outer reality, it becomes harder to forget or deny that we have an inner teacher who wants to lay a claim on our lives. Reflective question number 5 in the Soul Matters material asks, who taught you that wholeness does not mean perfection? Who helped you with the work of embracing brokenness rather than trying to hide it or fix it? This is an important question to trace along the Mobius strip of our life story, because we do have limits. We do become broken. We do make mistakes. But by accepting our limits, by embracing the broken parts of our lives, we also find the path to wholeness. We will never be whole if we expect ourselves and each other to be perfect. And the path to wholeness takes a long time to travel. In the season finale of This Is Us television drama last week, don't worry if you haven't seen it, this is not a spoiler. Adult Kevin said to his young teen niece, Tess, I don't think we figure out who we are all at one time. It happens over a long period of time, piece by piece. A couple of years ago, I got close with your dad and I found a piece of myself. Then I met your aunt and I found another piece of myself. That's sort of how it works. We go through this life slowly but surely, collecting little pieces of ourselves that we can't live without, until eventually we have enough of them to where we feel whole. In The Cure for Sorrow, a book of blessings for time of grief, Jan Richardson writes about loss and healing. You had hardly thought your heart could be so claimed, and so willingly. Now the heart that gave itself with such gladness finds itself stunned by its anguish, abandoned and inhabited all at the same time by the absence that has gathered itself to you. It will astonish you how grief comes with such purpose to undo us, to unmake us with tools fashioned so exactly to its terrible art. How with such precision they are fitted for the rending, tearing, unstitching, unmooring, unhinging, undoing of us. It's hard to see from here how these tools are the same ones that will make us again, this time with an aching slowness, a painful pace so measured we will hardly perceive it when it begins to happen. The joining that comes piece to piece in a pattern that will never be the same, but will leave us inexplicably whole.